keep it there to get that mood on. Oh, wake up, Israel, put off your slumber, for the truth shall make you free. For out of Zion comes your Redeemer in the year of Jubilee. Oh, hallelujah, oh, hallelujah, hallelujah, praise the Lord. Oh, hallelujah, oh, hallelujah, hallelujah, praise the Lord. For in the furnace of much affliction I have chosen you, behold. And so for iron I'll give you silver, and for brass I'll give you gold. Oh, hallelujah, oh, hallelujah, hallelujah, praise the Lord. Oh, hallelujah, oh, hallelujah, hallelujah, praise the Lord. You are my chosen, for I have sought you. You are graven on my hand, and I will gather those who are scattered. They shall come back to their land. Oh, hallelujah, oh, hallelujah, hallelujah, praise the Lord. Oh, hallelujah, oh, hallelujah, hallelujah, praise the Lord. Let's save it for the next one. I was going to do two of those hallelujahs, but we've got time. Oh, say shalom, hallelujah, say shalom, Be'akal Yisrael, V'imru, amen. Oh, say shalom, hallelujah, say shalom, aleinu, Be'akal Yisrael, V'imru, amen. Yahweh say shalom, Yahweh say shalom, shalom aleinu, V'akal Yisrael. Yahweh say shalom, Yahweh say shalom, shalom aleinu, V'akal Yisrael. Yahweh say shalom, Yahweh say shalom, shalom aleinu, V'akal Yisrael. Yahweh say shalom, Yahweh say shalom, shalom aleinu, V'akal Yisrael. Yahweh say shalom, Yahweh say shalom, shalom aleinu, V'akal Yisrael. All right. And now here's another toe tapper. I love the Lord because He hears my voice. I love the Lord because He hears my cry. I love the Lord because He hears my prayer. Turning His ear always to me. Turning His ear always to me. choose what key to do this in. It's not your choice.
Not
So-
too high, not too
What?
high.
Not too high. All right, so not too low either. Just right.
Just like Goldilocks.
The Goldilocks, here it is. Sing hallelujah to the Lord.
Sing hallelujah to the Lord.
Sing hallelujah to the Lord. Sing hallelujah. Sing hallelujah. Sing hallelujah to the Lord. Yeshua is coming back again. Yeshua is coming back again. Yeshua is coming. Yeshua is coming. Yeshua is coming back again. He will come back to save his own. He will come back to save his own. He will come back to save. He will come back to save. He will come back to save his own. So let us all worship him in love. Let us all worship him in love. Let us all worship him. Let us all worship him. Let us all worship him in love. Sing hallelujah to the Lord. Sing hallelujah to the Lord. Sing hallelujah. Sing hallelujah. Sing hallelujah to the Lord. Shabbat shalom. And hallelujah, of course, means what? In Hebrew.
Praise the Lord.
Praise the Lord. And that's what we're about to do. We haven't done it just because we say those words, but there's a good chance it's going to be coming up shortly after that.
Hey, Ruben.
So who's going to do the announcements? Is that you?
I guess it's shutting down. Yeah.
Would anyone like to come up?
Well, looks like it's me.
Oh, it's you. Okay. Hi.
Hi. Take off my slide turner hat and put on my announcement hat. Context clues, I didn't even know I was supposed to do it. All right, so we've been announcing this for a while. Next week, the first week in July, is when we jump off into the abyss with our new phone schedule. So everybody figure out which week you are based on the letter of your last name, and then be prepared to jump in. So it's right there. You can put this on your refrigerator or write it on your calendar. It'd be great. If you would be interested in being one of our wonderful greeters, we thank Celia and Carrie back there for helping us out this evening. If you would like to join them in that mitzvah, it can be anybody, men, women, boys, girls, everybody. let Sharon know. Sharon White will get you fixed up with that. Tomorrow night is Havdalah and game night. If you plan to attend, let Jenny know, so Jenny knows what to expect, right? Sure. Okay. All right, we have a book table that is in the online room. Some great books there that you can take advantage of. They are not for free. The instructions on how to obtain one of those are there. We are in the middle of our long, hot, and now wet summer. And the good news is we passed through the flood insurance time, and we'll keep on trucking, just like we always have, because God is good to us and takes care of us. Apart from that, thank you for coming tonight, braving the elements, and Shabbat Shalom.
Waiting on Rabbi, just gonna be here in just a second.
He's here. Tony and the microphone. It's okay.
I got it for you,
Yeah, that was non-technical difficulties. My tummy came apart just as I was ready to put everything together and come up here. So I came unhinged around the clip, as you see. So, now we got that all put together. If you'll turn to pages 10 to 13 from our game of thought, it reminds us that as we are here to celebrate this particular Shabbat, we are in the presence of a God who has promised to do good care of us. He is, in fact, a shield, not only for our ancestors, but also for us. So we join on those pages as Jacob leads, and then we respond. Pages 10 to 13.
Magen Avot bidavaro, Echayei metim b'ma'amaro, Ha'el hakadosh she'en kamuhu, Amaniach le'amo, Be'yom Shabbat ha'chadasho, Kivam ratza lahaniach lahem, לפניו נעבוד וירח אף אחד ונודה לשמו בכל יום. תמיד מעין הברכות אל ההודעות אדון השלום מקדש השבת ומברך שלי ומניח לי קדושה, ויעמדו שני הוני, זכר למעשה בראשית. זכר למעשה בראשית.
Together.
With his word he was a shield to our fathers. By his decree he will give life to the dead. The holy God with whom no other can compare, who provides his people rest each holy Sabbath day. In reverence and awe we will serve him daily, and every day we will thank him suitably. He is the God to whom all thanks are due, the Lord of peace who makes the Sabbath special. He blesses the seventh day for his people, to give them joy and remind them of creation.
As we kindle the Shabbat lights again this evening, we are reminded of, yes, the truths that we have just affirmed, as we thank him suitably for this day, because he's the one who makes Shabbat special. And so he gives us joy and reminds us not only of creation, but he reminds us of his commitment to us and his contract with us. He is our God. We are his people.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvoto, v'tzivanu lehadlik ner Shabbat. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who has set us apart by your commandments and commanded us to light the candles for the Sabbath. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvoto, v'tzivanu lehayot u'legoyim v'netalanu Yeshua Meshikenu ha'olam. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who sanctified us by your commandments and commanded us to be a light for the nations and gave us Yeshua, our Messiah, the light of the world. Shabbat Shalom.
Normally we have a Tehillat Ohr Chadash portion at this point. This time we have a Tehilot Ohr Chadash portion at this point. Pages 146 to 147 is that response. It's at the top of those pages. And particularly for those of you who are new, but also as a reminder to those who've been around for a long time, down through our history as a Jewish people, we've developed a number of different forms in how we respond to God as part of our worship or our liturgy. And some of these forms vary from place to place and from time to time among different groups of Jewish people, as do the tunes. And so if you're familiar with some of these forms and unfamiliar with others, that's okay. That's the way our Jewish world operates, and so we have down through history. If the tunes are a little different than what you've heard before, well, that's okay too. Because again, down through the years, we have developed different tunes, and we continue to develop different tunes, and each cantor has his or her own style as well. So having said that by way of introduction, by now you have found pages 146 and 147. We were just reminded in the second part of the blessings for the Shabbat lights of the role of Yeshua, our Messiah. That is amplified for us in this prayer, and that prayer is one that we pray on behalf of ourselves and for others, so we can enter more into the reality of the one who stands behind the guarantee that we know of as Shabbat. With that by way of introduction, we're now ready to respond. I'll lead you through the opening line in the Hebrew and ask that you join with me in that prayer, the whole of the English. Ba'avur zot gam anuchi acharei shami amutchan Adonenu Yeshua. And you respond?
For this reason, ever since I heard about your faith in the Lord Yeshua and your love for all the saints, I have not stopped giving thanks for you, remembering you in my prayers. I keep asking that the God of our Lord Yeshua the Messiah, the glorious Father, may give you the spirit of wisdom and revelation, so that you may know him better. I pray also that the eyes of your heart may be enlightened, in order that you may know the hope to which he has called you, the riches of his glorious inheritance in the saints, and his incomparably great power for us who believe. That power is like the working of his mighty strength, which he exerted in Messiah when he raised him from the dead and seated him at his right hand in heavenly realms, far above all rule and authority, power and dominion, and every title that can be given, not only in the present age, but also in the one to come.
He's been raised from the dead and seated at God's right hand in heavenly realms, far above all rule and authority, power and dominion. By the way, that's an image that's found not only in this rabbi's prayer, but in the understanding of the rabbis of old. And it is that scene that, in a sense, we now enter into as we respond with pages 40 and 41, Elohim Asher.
Elohim Asher Diber, Mikadem Pe'amim Rabot, Uvivrachim Rabot El Ha'avot, Be'yad HaNevi'im, Diber Aleinu Be'acharit Hayamim Ha'eile, Be'yad HaBein Asher, Sam Le'yoresh Kol, U'yado, Gamasa et Olamim, Uzohar Kevodo, B'Tselem Atzmuto, Benoseko B'dvaro, Rav Hagvura, Ulachar She'asa, Tihur Chatayim, Yashar Le'emin, Hadullah. Together? In the past, God spoke to our fathers through the prophets, and many times in various ways. But now, in the end of days, he has spoken to us by the Messiah, his Son, whom he appointed the heir of all things, and through whom he made the universe. The Son is the full radiance of God's glory, and the flawless manifestation of his reality. He sustains all things by his powerful word. After he made atonement for sins, he sat down in the place of authority, beside the majesty in heaven. True and firm, established and lasting, right and faithful, loved and treasured, desired and pleasant, feared and mighty, ordered and acceptable, good and beautiful is this word to us forever and ever.
As I said a few moments ago, down through the years in synagogues around the world, different aspects of our traditions have developed. Usually when we approach God at this particular point in time with a response of gratitude that's called Kaddish, and it's in one of its very many forms, we do so from a part of the world that represents where many of us have come from. But from another part of the Jewish world, the Sephardi world, there's another form of Kaddish which we've become very familiar with and which we are now ready to use on pages 156 and 157. So now as we respond there in gratitude, we build on what has happened thus far in our service, and that is we acknowledge that Yeshua is seated in the place of ultimate authority. Now we anticipate the time that he will return, and Sephardi Kaddish helps put the focus on that. And again, this is Sephardi Kaddish, this is not a Messianic Kaddish. It's part of how some of our traditions develop in the larger Jewish world. Pages 156 and 157.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, ויעמוד דברי חירותי, וימליך מלכותי, ויצמח פורקני ויקרב משיחי, וחי יכונו ויום יכון, וחי ידפו בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב יאמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך. Kol me'amaya yitbarach. Vayishtabach v'yitpa v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yithale v'yithalal. Shemei d'chodesha barichu. Le'ele min chol birchata v'shirata tushbachata v'nechamata d'amiran ve'amma v'imru Amen. Yehi shlama rabba mishmaya v'chaim tovim aleinu ve'akol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav u'yaseh shalom aleinu ve'akol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Glorified and sanctified be his great name in the world which is created according to his will. May he bring about the reign of his kingdom and cause his salvation to sprout and bring near his Messiah in your lifetime and in your days and in the life of all the house of Israel speedily, yes soon, and say, Amen. May his great name be blessed forever and forever eternally. Blessed and praised, glorified and exalted, extolled and honored, adored and lauded be the name of the Holy One, blessed be he, who is high above, far above all blessings and hymns and praises and consolations which are spoken in the world, and say, Amen. May there be great peace from heaven and good life for us and for all Israel, and say, Amen. May he who makes peace in the heavenly realms, may he make peace for us and for all Israel, and say, Amen.
We continue our response of gratitude, often called praise, as we now turn to the meter portions for this evening, pages 66 to 71. As we rise, we stand facing Jerusalem, the direction of the ark, and utilizing these words now to continue to express our gratitude to our God for all that he's done for us. And in the very beginning, the very first of these paragraphs, we're reminded that he will in love send a Redeemer to his children's children for the sake of his name. And that is what we continue to anticipate as we respond with these prayers. Pages 66 to 67. Ikamoka Ba'al Givuot. Who is like you, Lord of might? Who can be compared to you, O King? Which is why we sanctify your name in the world as they sanctify it in the highest heavens. As it is written by your prophet, they call out to each other and they say,
Holy, 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 Lord of hosts, all the earth is full of his glory.
and those across from them come back with this resounding response.
Praise be the splendor of the Lord everywhere in his manifest.
And then in the holy writings it is added,
The Lord shall reign forever, your God, O Zion, for all generations.
so in every generation we will tell of your greatness. In every age we will proclaim your holiness. Your praise will certainly never depart from our lips, because you are a great and holy God and King, Baruch atah Adonai, Ha'el HaKadosh. Blessed are you, O Lord. You are the holy God. You may be seated. Picking up on that same theme that was found in the second paragraph of our response, of our Amidah. We turn to pages 44 to 45 as we continue to praise our God and affirm, recognize that truly there is none like you, O Lord, among the gods. The text begins, praise our exalted God, page 45. Blessed is he who is to be blessed. Moses and the people of Israel sang this song to you with great joy, and we join in that great joyful song as they all said, so now we also all say,
Who is like you, O Lord, among the gods? Who is like you, glorious in holiness, awesome in praises, doing wonders?
Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi chamocha nedar b'kodesh, nora tehilot osef elei. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi chamocha nedar b'kodesh, nora tehilot osef elei.
We've raised that question now twice. It deserves an answer. The answer is found on pages 88 and 89, and so we respond and answer the question as we say, truly, there is none like you, O Lord, among the gods.
Ein kamocha Elohim Adonai, ואין כמעשיך. מלכותך מלכות כל עולמים, וממשלתך בכל דור ודור, בכל דור ודור. אדוני מלך, אדוני מלך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. אדוני עוז לעמו ייתן, אדוני יברך את עמו בשלום.
There is none like you among the gods, my Lord, and there is nothing that compares to your deeds. Your kingdom is a kingdom that endures for all eternity, and your sovereignty extends throughout all generations. The Lord reigns, the Lord has reigned, the Lord shall reign throughout eternity. The Lord will bless his people with peace.
We talked about the Lord reigning, and now we say to the Lord, Lord, reign over me throughout my life in totality. That is, in effect, what the central response of the Shema is all about, pages 34 and 39. As we now rise and face Jerusalem in the direction of the ark, as we pledge to him our commitment, our affirmation, wholeheartedly, totally, completely. In our tradition, there's a larger response that's included within the Shema, and tonight we will add that response, add part of that response. It's pages 40 and 41. And it's appropriate that we do so because it's part of our parsha for this evening. It's a reminder not only that he is the Lord, our God, but he's provided with us some instructions or guidelines to follow in the tzitzit on our talit, or that we wear, remind us of exactly that in this text. It informs us in that fashion. So we begin on pages 34 to 39 and move to pages 40 to 40.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Erod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha v'kol lavcha והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבבך ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשקתך ובמך וכשאתה להיות על ידך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone.
Blessed be he whose glorious kingdom is eternal.
Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your life, and with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home, and when you walk along the road, when you lie down, and when you get up. Tie them as reminders on your hands, and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the doorframes of your houses, and on your gates.
Continuing now on pages 40 and 41.
Speak to the children of Israel, and tell them to make fringes in the borders of their garments throughout their generations, and to put upon the fringe of the borders a thread of blue. And it shall be a fringe for you to look upon and remember all the commandments of the Lord, and do them, and that you follow not after your own eyes, after which you used to go astray, that you may remember and do all my commandments, and be holy to your God. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I am the Lord your God.
As we turn now to pages 88 and 89, we're reminded that which we affirm, that which we acknowledge, that the Lord is our King, will in fact be acknowledged around the world. It's the time when, as Vayi even so points out, for from Zion will go forth the Torah and the word of Lord out of Jerusalem, and all will acknowledge him as their Lord and King. Pages 88 and 89 is our response at this point.
ויהי בצהרון ויאמר משה קום אדוני ויפוצו אויביך וינוסו לשנאך מפניך כי מציון תצא תורה כי מציון תצא תורה ודבר אדוני Yerushalayim, Baruch Shenatan Torah, Torah, Baruch Shenatan Torah, Torah, Le'amol Yisrael, B'kedushato. And it came to pass, whenever the ark went forward, Moses would say, Arise, O Lord, and let your enemies be scattered. May those who hate you flee from before you. For from Zion shall go forth the Torah, and the word of the Lord out of Jerusalem. Blessed be he who in holiness gave the Torah to his people, Israel.
And now as people Israel and those who've connected themselves to our community respond to this great gift, the response is found on page 133.
The ark now unveils its treasure.
To our eyes and minds and hearts.
Inside the scroll of Torah stands.
It stands there with all its richness and wisdom.
As we listen, voices speak, voices of our ancestors.
Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Joseph, and Moses.
O God, they bring us your instructions for us.
Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, and Miriam speak to us as well.
O God, they move us to respond to your promises to us.
We are grateful for your words, the words of Torah.
Hear, O Israel, the Lord calls.
We will hear your words that we may learn them, love them, live them.
What does the Lord require of you? To fear him, love him, serve him, and walk in all his ways.
All the Lord has said, we will do.
Misha Barach Avatim, Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. May he bless Rabbi John. May he bless Matthew. May he bless Sharon. And may he bless Don, who have come up to honor God in the Torah. May the Holy One bless them and their families and send blessing and prosperity on all the work of their hands. Baruch et Adonai HaMavorach.
Baruch Adonai HaMavorach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu michol ha'amim v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai notein haTorah.
Amen.
Bless the Lord who is blessed.
Bless the Lord who is blessed forever and ever.
Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who chose us from all peoples and gave to us his Torah. Blessed are you, O Lord, giver of the Torah.
V'daber Adonai el Moshe lemor, shalach lach anushim vayatu et haaretz Canaan, asher ani noten livnei Yisrael. You may be seated. And so the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, how should we put it? Send for your own purposes, or if you so choose, or for your own benefit, men or people, and they will scout out the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the children of Israel. And so begins a very interesting story, one of my favorite stories in the Torah, particularly in the book of Numbers. But I won't spend any time talking about that story tonight. We may get back to it in several weeks. But it's a very interesting story that reminds us of God's promises, the people who were responsive to those promises and those who had their doubts. And then the story comes full circle in the Haftarah passage, which is from the book of Joshua. But again, that's part of another story for another evening. It's just a reminder that yet again, God was always there for his people through this wilderness experience. And in fact, you'll hear more about that in the next section of this, Parsha for this week, as it's read to you.
I'm reading Numbers 14, 6 through 10. Yehoshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jephunneh from the detachment that had scouted the land tore their clothes and said to the whole community of Israel, "The land we passed through in order to spy it out is an outstandingly good land. If Adonai is pleased with us, then he will bring us into this land and give it to us, a land flowing with milk and honey. Just don't rebel against Adonai, and don't be afraid of the people living in the land. We'll eat them up. Their defense has been taken away from them, and Adonai is with us. Don't be afraid of them." Then the glory of Adonai appeared in the tent of meeting to all the people of Israel.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, v'chayo olam netavatochenu. Baruch atah Adonai notein haTorah.
Amen.
Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who gave us the Torah of truth and life everlasting planted in our midst. Blessed are you, O Lord, giver of the Torah.
He is truly one who gave to us the Torah. V'zot HaTorah reminds us of that, and we acknowledge that now as we stand, as our ancestors stood before him to receive these words that come directly from God. Pages 98 and 99 for V'zot HaTorah and our acknowledgments. Page 95 if you need the transliteration.
V'zot HaTorah asher sam Moshe lifnei bnei Yisrael al pi Adonai beyad Moshe. This is the Torah which Moses placed before the children of Israel. It is in accord with the Lord's command by the hand of Moses.
You may be seated. Before this next reading, let me simply say one thing about the Haftarah passage, and that is the very words that you heard coming from Caleb and Joshua in this text, and then the Lord showed up to sort of back it up, are the words that are on the lips of those who inhabit Jericho and Canaan, as Joshua 2 reminds us. That there is a people coming who will swallow us up. And so, as God said, he gave to them the land.
I'm going to be reading Ephesians chapter 2, verse 4 through 7. Instead, because of the immense mercy and out of intense love for us, God brought us back to life along with the Messiah, even though we were dead toward him because of our disobedience. Then, in union with Messiah Yeshua, he raised us up and seated us with him in the heavenly realms. He did this to display to ages to come his measureless rich grace and his kindness toward us through Messiah Yeshua.
If those words impact us, as they should, as should also the words of the Parsha, as well as Haftarah, transform our lives. So we now affirm that that's what we want as we respond with Etz Chaim, pages 96 and 97. It's a tree of life waiting to take root in us, and so we say, renew our days as of old.
Etz Chaim lama chazikima v'tom heha meushar raheha darkei noam v'chol nativoteha shalom. Ashivenu Adonai elecha v'nashuva Chadesh Yameinu Chadesh Yameinu Kedem. Ashivenu Adonai elecha v'nashuva Chadesh Yameinu Chadesh Yameinu Kedem. The tree of life it is to those who take hold of it, and happy are those who support it. Its ways are ways of pleasantness, and all its paths are peace. Turn us, Lord, to you, and let us return. Renew our days as of old.
As in fact he renews our days as of old, we are better equipped to stand before him as his priests. And we now, in fact, do stand before him as his priests, as the priests of old did in the temple. And we respond on pages 98 and 99 with Korach.
Uvnocho Yomar, Shuva, Adonai Revot of Fei Yisrael. When the ark rested, Moses would say, Return, O Lord, to the myriads of Israel's families. Arise, O Lord, to your resting place, you and your mighty ark. Clothe your priests with righteousness. May those who have experienced your faithful love shout for joy. For the sake of your servant David, don't delay the return of your Messiah. Ba'avor David Rabdecha, al teshev b'nei Eshechecha. Ki lechach tov natati lechem torati al ta'azovu. I give you good instruction. Do not forsake my Torah.
Everyone greet each other.
Thanks for being here. Coming down from the view. I'm ready.
Okay, enough with the greetings one another. We'll get further opportunity to do that later. These days we hear a lot about power. Political power, solar power, nuclear power, power of the elements, like earthquakes and hurricanes, storms, and floods, for which we now once again have insurance. Thank you for that response. We also see comparisons of military power or references to the balance of power in crucial regions around the earth. But far stronger than all of these forms of power, stronger even than the immense energy harnessed and released by nuclear power or the forces of nature, far stronger is another even greater power. In fact, it's the power that took a dead man, and despite all the physical forces and all the spiritual forces which desperately tried to keep him dead, this power brought him back to life. This very same amazing power then took him through the very strongholds of these spiritual forces, despite their desperate attempts to keep him on earth, and enthroned him in a position of authority and victory over them. This power is, of course, nothing less than the resurrection power of God, which raised Yeshua from the dead, which produced his ascension and then seated him to rule over the entire universe, both seen and unseen. Rav Shaul talks about this power in the text that was our Tefillot Ohr Chadash portion for this evening, Ephesians chapter 1, and the prayer that's found therein. His discussion spills over into chapter 2, which was read for you tonight. And he, in a very real way, gushes on so that we don't even have a verb in chapter 2 until we get to verse 5. As he carries on the thoughts of chapter 1, verses 18 and following, and further explains this resurrection power and its implications for us. As you see it in the outline that's in one of the inserts in the bulletin, first thing he talks about in this chapter is the reach of resurrection power, the opening 3 verses. And he tells us that it reached out to us when we were dead. Dead? Well, described further in some translations, dead in transgressions and sins, the Hebrew term that stands behind this, as you see it translated in the translation that's provided for you in the insert on the, I think, the flip side of the outline. It has to do with disobedience. It has to do with wrongdoing. And when he says dead here, he's not talking about something physically, but he's talking about something that is just as certainly true. We're dead because of our wrongdoings and our disobedience. Sometimes that's called sin. But you'll pardon me for not using that term because traditionally on Shabbat, we don't mention sin. Now I know I'm sort of bending the rule a little by talking about his disobedience and wrongdoing, but allow me that little bit of a loophole for tonight, because that's what the text talks about. Now, give me that sort of an excuse. What does he mean when he uses this phrase? He's referring to the condition of those who have no life beyond the life of this world, which is dominated in effect by death and deadening stuff. And in fact, in a sense, you get an echo of Isaiah chapter 59, the opening couple verses, which gives us something of the effect of just this kind of a condition. God says concerning himself, my arm is not so short that it can't reach out to you or can't touch you, but your wrongdoings have put in a separation between me and you. And in that sense, that too is what God said to Adam in the garden, to Adam and Eve, when he said, you will die. You would have this would be the implication with regard to your relationship with me if you don't follow these particular guidelines. So it reached us when we were dead. It also, verse 2, reached us when we were dominated. And that's further amplified by the translation because it tells us we followed the ways of this world, depending on the translation. Another good translation says, your conduct was shaped after the pattern of this world. You walked a certain way, the text says. Interestingly enough, the very first descriptor that was used of us 2,000 years ago, and by us I don't now mean you and me, but the previous editions of you and me, or the earlier parts of the Messianic community, we were first called the way. In other words, it was a path which we followed. The Hebrew term, I've shared this with you on a number of occasions, the Hebrew term for walk is halach, from which we derive the term halakha, which has to do with the way in which we walk or live. Look, we responded as the Torah went forth among us. What is it, O Israel, that the Lord your God requires of you? Fear him, serve him, love him, and walk in all his ways. So we were walking the wrong way, so to speak. And it's characterized by the way in which this world walks. That, by the way, is a rabbinic concept, the olam hazeh. It has to do with this world in which we live, as well as the influences that shape that world and the way in which we live. So it's not just the world that's in view here, but the course or the pattern of this world, the way in which perspectives and attitudes influence the way in which people respond and then live. And he says that's in contrast with the coming time or the coming world and all it represents. So what does this coming world represent? That too is a rabbinic concept. It represents God's reign through the Messiah. It represents the Torah proceeding from Jerusalem, as we just acknowledged and in fact anticipated. This resurrection power also reached us when we were disobedient. In other words, when we were walking our own way. And so the opening paragraph sets the stage then for the main point of the passage, the main message. And that has to do with the results of resurrection power. That's verses 4 to 6. Verse 4 tells us that one of the results of resurrection power was a display of amazing compassion, which is why our translation nicely puts it in describing God. It talks about his intense love. It talks about his immense mercy. Verse 5 goes on to describe his grace when we were dead because of our disobedience. And it tells us we were dead toward him. And that's when this display of amazing compassion took place. And so, truly, it was amazing. a truly gracious rescue that's described here. But verses 5 and 6 now get to the heart of the message here in this chapter, and the central point that I want to share with you this evening. One of the results of resurrection power is it is a dynamic of astounding comparison. And as we will find as we unwrap it just a little bit, and it produces an astonishing connection. And so the passage tells us that when we were dead, we were made alive. Made alive. Stark contrast to being dead due to disobedience. In other words, it has to do with our life in relationship with God. Now, we've been made alive in that fashion. It's a life beyond the life of this world, which is a dead end. It's a life of fullness and freedom. It's a life of dynamic and power. And we're not only made alive, the text says, we were raised and seated with him. Now, I usually throw out at this point how should I put it? An apology for getting grammatical with you at the end of a week, on a Friday night of all times, and on a Shabbat. But I've got to apologize yet again, because I'm going to get grammatical with you. But hang in there. This is not English grammar. This is Greek grammar. Yeah, they all said in unison. These verbs are the things that carry on action, in case you've forgotten it since it's Friday night, are compound verbs. There is a preposition stuck to the beginning of them. They're called sun, S-U-N in English letters, sun compounds. Now they're very important. In fact, they are so important that I managed to do a whole thesis on these kinds of verbs. So don't worry, I'm not going to give you that thesis tonight. But if you want to read it, we do have copies. Anyhow, these are compounds that indicate, because of the nature of this preposition sun, they indicate identification or union. In other words, you're linked with, you're connected to something or someone, you're joined to, you've become part of someone in some deeper, profound way. And the verbs that are used here are parallel to the verbs that were used in our Tefillot Ohr Chadash prayer from earlier this evening, Ephesians chapter 1, verses 19 and following. They're the very terms that are used there. And we know that this is the central point of this passage, because you will remember, speaking of verbs, that I said at the outset that the rabbi gushes on through this text, the end of chapter 1 into chapter 2, and there's no verb that appears until verse 5 in chapter 2. Well, we're in verse 5. So here's where the verbs appear. That's how we know this is central to his discussion. So let me remind you of our Tefillot Ohr Chadash portion. The rabbi says there, I pray that you will have a deep inner awareness to understand what? His incredibly great power. And too often we skip over this next phrase. His great power that is at work in us who trust him. And then he describes his powers. His power is like the awesome might he used when he raised Messiah from the dead and enthroned him in the position of ultimate authority in the heavenly realms. He rules there far above any ruler, authority, power, leader, or anything else that can be imagined, not only in this world, but in a future one as well. Amen. God placed all things under Messiah's authority and installed him as the head over all things for the benefit of the Messianic community. So reads that text. Same verbs in chapter 2 are the ones used in chapter 1. But there in chapter 2, it's now that we have been united with him in just this fashion. So what is he saying here? It means that we, in some way, share in his victory and authority. That means that we can proceed in our lives in confidence, not in fear, regardless of what there may be out there that may stand in opposition to us, whether on a human or perhaps a supra-human level. This is the kind of thing that provides us with power for living fully and freely and dynamically. He describes this taking place in the heavenly realms. And in that sense, it completes the parallel in the verses I just read for you, our Tefillot Ohr Chadash portion. Somehow we are seated together with him above the spirits, in contrast to being under their influence, whatever kind of spirits they may or may not be. So what does that mean for us? Among other things, it means that we don't have to be impacted by these forces, whether human forces or extra-human forces. We don't have to be influenced by them. Because we have risen above them in being united with Yeshua, we can rise above them in our daily lives. And you'll notice verse 6 tells us it's because we're in Yeshua. Now here he flips prepositions. It's not the preposition sun, it's a preposition in or in. You would have expected the preposition sun. You should have, because I did a whole thesis that told you should have expected it. So what is he saying here? This particular preposition states the relationship we have with Yeshua in its completest form, so to speak. In other words, there's a total organic union that is described here. There is, to look at it from a slightly different Near Eastern perspective, a historical correspondence that has taken place. Because what's happened to him has happened to us. What this text is saying, or the rabbi is saying, is that we're an integral part of him. And as Yeshua was dead, in a true sense, we died too. And so we were truly then made alive, raised and seated, installed, so to speak, in the heavenly realms. Now, again, this is an interesting concept, but it actually describes a divine action in some way contemporary with the resurrection and ascension of Yeshua. It's independent of human action. It's what God has done, what God has caused to be. In other words, what happened to him happened to us in some very real way. It functions something like this. You know, you stick a bookmark in a book, right? And then whatever happens to the book happens to the bookmark. In that same sense, we are in Yeshua and what has happened to him in a very real and profound way. Sometimes we don't even fully understand just exactly how it has happened to us as well. That is what's being said here and that we're trying to grasp. God's graciousness has lifted us, in other words, into a new life, into a new world, into new realities with new resources, and perhaps even to a new authority that we share with him. That's the core of what he's telling us here. And what are the reasons for this kind of resurrection power? Well, in the next several verses, verses 7 to 10, he explains that for us. Reason number one is so that God could exhibit his graciousness. And our text tells us it is measureless, it's rich, it's incomparable. This begins to echo with the words found in Exodus chapter 34, verses 6 and 7, where when God spoke to Moses again on that mountain, Moses was up there to see what God, wanted to see more of what God was like, so to speak. And God said, "You want to know what I'm like? Here's what I'm like. I'm overflowing in mercy. I'm superabounding in graciousness. I'm spilling over in love and in compassion." In the Hebrew words, run out of terms to use. That's very much the same with what's going on here when he utilizes this vocabulary here. Measureless, rich, incomparable. So God could exhibit his graciousness. And it has to do also with the coming age or ages. As I said before, this is a rabbinic concept. Yolam habalam, haba. It's in contrast to this world in which we live, Olam hazeh. It's a world in which we will forever be living under the reign of the Messiah. And we get a taste of that now. It has to do with the restoration of the universe, as even all of creation itself longs for, as the rabbi who writes this passage writes in another passage, Romans chapter 8. And this graciousness is exhibited to us, the text says. As you put it all together, that implies that we're the pinnacle of his purpose. We are, in that sense, his masterpiece. Too often we come across, as you are well aware, as his messy piece, but actually we are his masterpiece. Thank you for those of you who got that, but that's okay. And this has taken place through Yeshua. In other words, Yeshua was the dramatic demonstration of God's graciousness. He was the conduit conveying that graciousness to us. But also, the reason for the resurrection power was so that God could extend his gift to us. Verses 8 and 9. And I'm not going to go into verses 8 and 9 because a number of months ago we did, in fact, look at that, and because most people memorized this verse, or these verses. I want to move on then to the next reason for his resurrection power. That has to do with verse 10, which too often we forget to add to this passage, even though the rabbi wrote it with this as part of the passage. And the reason for resurrection power, as we're told here, it has to do with executing good works. And the first thing to notice in this part of the text in verse 10 is we are God's workmanship. It's a very interesting term. It means his crafting. Some of you do get involved in doing crafts. This is crafts to the nth degree because God's the craftsman here. It's very similar to what is later mentioned, and we are created in Yeshua. We're talking about here a new or a renewed creation. Now, by the way, the rabbi spoke about this in 2 Corinthians 5, verses 17 to 21. But the main point is, because we don't have the time to unwrap that text, is he's talking about a whole new life. He's talking about a fresh beginning with new resources. And the reason for that is because, why? Because we are in Yeshua. Because we are in the union with Yeshua. We have been not only united with him, we have been connected with him. And the purpose is, as you see at the end of this verse, to do good works. Another preposition here. Remember, I did give a full apology for doing this. This one is at P. It has to do with a view to. It has to do with focus on purpose or result. And you'll notice then as you put these texts together, verses 8 and 9 with verse 10, that all of this has to do, it doesn't result from works, so it's not of works, but it is unto works. It produces works. It doesn't begin here with works, but it leads to here, namely works. What are works all about? We call them, in our tradition, mitzvot. Mitzvot, the way in which we're supposed to walk or live before God, in stark contrast with the way in which we used to, verses 2 and 3 said. Furthermore, he says these were prepared in advance, or these were planned. This reminds us once again that this is God's purpose. We have a part, the text is telling us, in accomplishing God's purpose. That means he's talking about our efforts and our activity are significant. And so we are part of his plan to bring about what's called tikkun ha'olam, the remedying or the repairing of the world. This is a very interesting text that this rabbi writes in Ephesians chapter 2, verse 10. Reminded me of another rabbi, roughly of the same time period, who said the following. For those of you who are familiar with Jewish history, it's Yochanan ben Zakkai. If you're not familiar with Jewish history, it's still Yochanan ben Zakkai. And you should become familiar with him, because had it not been for Yochanan ben Zakkai, we would not be here today. Because as the temple was falling and Jerusalem was being destroyed, he intervened to enable us to have an ongoing religious and educational presence or community that preserved Judaism after the temple fell. Enough about the commercial for Yochanan. Here's what he had to say. He says, if you perform many mitzvot, do not think you have any merit. You enter the relationship by grace, not by works, is what the previous text says, right? He says, this is the purpose for which you've been created. Quote the other rabbi again. For God handcrafted us, and in union with Messiah Yeshua, he created us for a life of doing the good he planned for us. Says exactly the same thing. Should that surprise you? No, because both of these gentlemen were very good, renowned rabbis of the first century. In conclusion, let me share with you the responsibilities of resurrection power. It's based on what we've looked at already. Resurrection power, remember, it's the greatest power in the universe. And it reached us. And for that reason, our response or responsibility needs to be to thank God. Resurrection power results, remember, in that display of an amazing comparison. God's gracious. Now let's call it this, as we look at the terms in the text. It's his outsized graciousness and love and mercy. The resurrection power resulted not only in a display of amazing comparison, but in a dynamic of an astounding, but a display of amazing compassion. I got myself confused. I put the two together. Let me pull them apart. A display of amazing compassion helps if I can read my own writing. A dynamic of astounding comparison. Remember that astonishing connection that was brought about because we've been made alive together with Yeshua. We've been brought back from the dead. We've ascended and been seated with him in parallel to and in union with Yeshua. And what we need to do by way of response or responsibility here is live in realization of this. Our lives should then reflect this as we confidently and actively draw on these resources and live in light of these realities as we acknowledge this amazing connection and act on these truths. We were dead, now we're alive, so we can live as if we've been truly resurrected because we have. It's our connection to Yeshua. Not only that, we've ascended with him in a very real way into the heavenly realms so that we don't need to be trapped by the world in which we live. And both the influences that are part of it, but also the impediments that keep us from living our lives more fully. So we don't have to be under things because we can live above them. There are reasons for this display of resurrection power. Please remember, as we just looked at it, so that we can execute good works as a new creation, doing our part in accomplishing God's purpose. I'm going to combine two languages at this point, Yiddish and Hebrew. Shouldn't be a problem because Yiddish is actually a combination of Hebrew and another language, German. Now I'm going to do this because I have this idiosyncratic eccentricity, you like that phrase? For alliteration. In Yiddish there's a term for a really good person. Usually it's considered to be masculine. It's not if you understand the language. It's the term mensch. A mensch can be a woman just as easily as a man, and more often than not it tends to be a woman more often than a man. So the purpose behind all this, and I've set it up so we could execute good works as a new creation, doing our part in accomplishing God's purpose as mitzvah mention. I went a long way to get to that, so thank you for your response. Mitzvah mention. That means we need to live in a new way as new creatures with new power. Remember, Rav Shaul began back in chapter 1, praying as we, in fact, incorporated that prayer for ourselves and for each other, praying that we might know in our own personal experience that mighty energy that is available to all the followers of Yeshua. It's the very power that raised and enthroned Yeshua. In the same way, it raised and exalted us in and with him. Because we can't be separated from him any more than a body can be separated from its head. At least not. I know you can separate the head from the body, but you understand what I'm saying. There are several results of God's actions in all this. And that is that it lifts us beyond the present world and its pressures, and it sets us in the heavenly realms, and it lifts us above the control and the influences which dominate the course of life here on earth. And it seats us where Yeshua is seated, above all these powers that are or can be. It lifts us out of death, being deadened, and it makes us truly alive and alive with power. And please don't misunderstand me or the other rabbi that's talking here in this text. We're not talking about spiritual mumbo-jumbo or some sort of spooky other world. We're talking about how we live concretely on this earth and the power to live concretely on this earth, above and beyond our circumstances, with this new incredibly great power that's been provided to us because we are in Yeshua and we are united with and to Yeshua. So it raises the closing questions relating to the responsibilities of resurrection power. Do our lives reflect the realities of being truly alive, no longer deadened? Do we reflect the results of being joined intimately to Yeshua and lifted beyond this world and its control, reflecting Yeshua's victory over the influences around us, being lifted above the forces and the powers which dominate our world? Friends, the bottom line is this: we have supernatural resources and resurrection power available at our fingertips. So do we realize it, and do we utilize it? Do we appreciate it, and do we appropriate it? First, we need to understand it. Then we need to integrate and internalize it. And then we need to count on it being true in our lives as we live it. As we take this next few minutes in quiet, take the first steps on that walk, if you've not already done so, to live as if you've been raised to new heights, because you have. Pages 102 to 107, the Layman anticipates that, which we've been anticipating this whole evening, in which we get a taste of if we live this kind of raised to new heights lives. And namely, that's the time when the world will be perfected under the rule of the Lord Almighty. We rise in anticipation of that. We face Jerusalem yet again, the place from which all of this will center, or the place where all of this will center, and from which all of this will derive. And we anticipate that time when the world, not only the world will be perfected, it's the time of the kingdom of David's greater son. And so now we accept our calling and our task as we respond with these words.
עלינו לשבח באדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו פוגעי הרצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם כפינו כהם, וגור עלינו כקל עוונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא, שהוא נותן שמיים ויוצר הארץ, ומושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינתו זו בגבי מרומים. הוא אלוהינו, אלוה, את מלכנו, בחסולתו, ככתוב בתורתו, וידעת היום, והשתה אותה, אל לבביך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל, ועל הארץ מתחת עינו. It is incumbent upon us to praise the Master of all, to exalt the Creator of the world, For he has made us distinct from the nations, unique among the families of the earth. Our destiny is not like theirs. Our calling is our task. We bow down and acknowledge before the King of Kings that there is none like him. For he stretched forth the heavens like a tent and established the earth. Truly there is none like our Lord and King. As the Torah says, you shall know this day and reflect in your heart that it is the Lord who is God in the heavens above, and on the earth beneath there is none else. We hope, O Lord our God, to soon behold your majestic glory, when all abominations shall be removed, and all false gods shall be at an end. Then shall the world be perfected under the rule of the Lord Almighty, and all mankind shall call upon your name. For to you every knee must bow, and every tongue declare that you are God. Reign over us soon and forever. May the kingdom of David's great Son be established forever. For then shall the words be fulfilled. The Lord shall be king forever, and the Lord shall be king over all the earth. On that day the Lord shall be one, and his name one. V'ne'amar Ahaya Adonai L'melech al kol haaretz Bayom hahu yihyeh Adonai echad U'shemo echad.
You may be seated. With one exception.